Welcome back to Burn to Notice, the series dedicated to Michael Weston and his crew. If you are new to the series, there's a link in the description down below to catch you up. This episode begins with a recap of last season. Well, at least Carla and Victor's story and how they came to an end, and reminding us that Mike is now without a safety net provided by management. And it officially begins with Mike washing up on a beach after swimming 5 miles in a suit, which is a little over double what is required for an Ironman. But the chase is not over when he notices cops being a little too observant of him, and he runs and grabs whatever he can change into, which just so happens to be a pink shirt and the most conspicuous shades you've ever seen. That might as well say,
Hi, I'm your spy.
he is able to at least slip the cops by ducking into a hotel where he breaks into a maintenance locker to make a phone call to Fee, and he begins to create a bomb to escape, but Fee gives him a heads up to just forget it, and he acquiesces to that. And it is interesting that their conversation is not only practical, but it is also a little flirty. Also, it's nice that he acknowledges Fee's help with Carla, but this boils over when he forgoes a fight in order to be captured by the local police. And I like this over other media that would have made a really big deal of the capture of this highly trained, well-known spy. They just capture him and put him in prison. Mike gets his own cell, which seems very unlikely, but I'll let it slide for now. Luckily, Sam is able to continue working on a plan to set Mike free, but unfortunately, he is unsuccessful. But he lets Mike know that things about him have changed, meaning that he's even more radioactive than before. But it still means that Mike is burned. And this is where Sam informs Mike of, well,
she's just a little upset about the house blowing up. It's not the whole house. It's just the sunroom. I mean, it came out okay, but I think the bottom line is you're better off in here until your ma cools off.
yeah, I wouldn't want to be in front of Maddie right now either. Also, management thinks they're being cute by sending Mike a card with his sunglasses he left in the helicopter, which is management's way of giving him the middle finger, as Sam leaves to figure out how he's going to get Mike out of jail. However, the next scene, Mike just gets released from prison, and it is a nice touch that he's wearing the same outfit that he got arrested in, but wouldn't the police take it because it was stolen, but whatever. This is where we meet Harlan, an old friend of Mike's, who was the one to bail Mike out. It is interesting to see Mike's reaction to him seeing Harlan for the first time. It seems like Mike doesn't like Harlan, but Mike acts normal enough since he did get him out of jail. But Harlan has some ulterior motives and needs Mike to help with a Venezuelan property mogul who uses money and power to strong arm the locals, with the main client not only losing her land, but also her father. Now it's up to Mike and his friends to convince them to stop in the only way they can. During this meeting, Mike picks up almost immediately that Harlan sprung Mike for his own selfish reasons. I also find it interesting how they are very similar, but also very different. For example, both were in special forces, but Mike is more intelligent, as we see when they are trying to gain info on Rufino at his club, and Harlan uses his big brain to get a copy of the key to Rufino's back room, only to get caught because he forgot.
Code for the alarm.
I also find it funny that Harlan is dating the client who speaks Spanish, but doesn't know the Spanish word for boss.
No, he's the boss. I forget how they say that in Spanish.
However, we not only see Rufino, but we also see the head of his security, Falcone. But after getting trapped in the back room, thanks to Harlan, Mike has to think of his way out of this situation. And I'm not too sure he could make a pry bar out of the chair leg. And even if it does, he isn't getting the leverage to pry that window open However, luckily they escape and regroup. At the loft, Harlan admits his mistake was due to his relationship with the client. This is where Mike enlists Sam to help get some dirt on Rufino by talking with Barry to get as much intel as possible and create a cover ID for Mike to get him a seat at the table. Meanwhile, Mike is at Maddie's helping her fix the house, with Mike remarking about how the walls were made by his father with different types of wood from other job sites and wiring from AC units, making him resourceful? When Sam arrives with the packet and the car that Maddie and Sam used to escape in the last episode, meaning...
Mrs. Reynolds, you're romancing an 80-year-old woman for a car?
No. Sam isn't romancing the grandmother, but the daughter. But I wouldn't put it past him to do that. Anyway, thanks to Barry, Mike not only has a new cover ID, he also has a meeting with Falcone to set another meeting with Rufino in the future. I mean, honestly, Rufino isn't going to meet someone new in person, so it does make sense, and the meeting goes somewhat well until Falcone, the gatekeeper, literally strong-arms Mike by popping his shoulder out of his socket. Mike continually plays dumb in order to set the meet, and somehow this works. And Falcone sets a meet, and when Falcone isn't watching, Mike puts his arm back into the socket. And the face he makes as he leaves the cover ID is just priceless. But now the team has to create a snatch and grab plan on the fly with minimal intel, so they go to the meet and prepare. Also, nice touch that Mike is icing his arm in this scene to show that he isn't invincible, and healing takes time. As they discuss his last meeting, it's telling that Harlan is too hot-headed when he agrees with Fee that Mike should have fought off Falcone instead of getting his shoulder messed up. However, this does foreshadow the end of the episode. Sam sets up the plan, which should work with the right prep work that's done at the loft, where Sam and Fee have a heart-to-heart talk about Mike potentially getting his government job back, and that Sam understands Mike where Fee doesn't. I find it funny how much nonchalant Fee is with explosives, and rightfully so. C4 is surprisingly stable, and she knows that it takes a lot more power to get it to explode than just simply throwing it at Sam. The next day, the team set up for the ambush, and the plan would work, but Rufino is a no-show.
What?
This is where Falcone tries to intimidate Mike, and that also doesn't work. So Mike plays his cover even harder and effectively walks off, but not before Falcone sets another meet, and this really drags the episode in my opinion. Honestly, how many times does Mike have to meet with Falcone just to meet with Rufino? It just messes up the pacing of this episode, because this is where they should have captured Rufino and then spent the rest of the episode interrogating him or blackmailing him or sending him back to Venezuela or literally anything else, and that would have been the second half of this episode's problem. They decide, nope, we've got to plan another snatch and grab. Back at the loft, Mike attains the location and begins the planning of the assault, and Harlan does something I don't think would taste good at all. He adds beer to his yogurt, which is a tell that something isn't right with him. Anyway, they create the plan to kidnap Rufino by incapacitating his security with a garbage truck hijacked by Fee and Harlan. Meanwhile, Mike and Sam continue to prep for the job, and they use Reese's Pieces for the truck, which I would peg Mike as an M&M's guy, and maybe Fee as Skittles, but Sam definitely, he's the Reese's Pieces guy. But he also divulges info on Rufino that he is just as nasty as they come, so as not to feel bad about the kidnapping. Also, Mike hides a knife in his briefcase and his belt to help him with the extraction. Maddie shows up and talks with Mike about Harlan, and it seems like Maddie has pegged Harlan as a surrogate for Nate in some ways, always wanting to help, but his eagerness gets the better of him, making him create the mistakes that Mike then has to clean up. And Maddie is correct, but for different reasons. I do find it interesting that all of the Westons in this episode pick up on Harlan being off while everyone else doesn't see anything wrong. Mike then meets with Rufino and Falcone at the train tracks. What's Falcone and trains? But they get into the car, and I think Mike makes a reference to the pilot.
Love these SUVs, they're roomy.
Because,
You know, Mercedes makes an SUV now. Big back seat. It's great. Surprisingly affordable, too.
Fee, Sam, and Harlan are ready to spring into action when Rufino becomes too suspicious and stops the car, failing the plan. But Mike is able to bring it back and talk Rufino into going along with it, at least enough to keep the plan together. And Fee slams into the lead car with Harlan running interference. And I always find it funny that Mike puts on his seatbelt right before, but it does make sense to do so. Just funny to me. Also, Sam is helping by laying down cover fire as Harlan approaches, and this is going well as it could. Meanwhile, Mike is able to gain control of Rufino and Falcone.
You have a slug in your engine block. Your team is pinned down, and I'm leaving with your boss. If I were you, I'd think about another line of work other than security.
Which is such a great line to leave on as a mic drop. No pun intended. But they're able to secure Rufino in the getaway vehicle, and Harlan learns the Spanish word for boss.
Nice work, Jefe.
Which is slight character development. When they get to the docks, Harlan double crosses Mike by unaliving Rufino. This is when he tells Mike that he's not the target, Rufino is.
What a twist!
They're not coming for Rufino.
Coming for you.
And for some reason, this whole episode, Harlan just seemed off. Like he wasn't even going to be close to being part of the group. And I guess this seals the deal. Meanwhile, Fee and Sam are waiting at the Carlito to debrief. And Fee starts to question their relationship with Harlan. At the docks, Harlan goes through his play and how he outsmarted the great Michael Weston.
He starts monologuing.
He starts like this prepared speech about how feeble I am compared to him, how inevitable my defeat is, how the world will soon be his, yada, yada, yada. Yammering. I mean, the guy has me on a platter, and he won't shut up.
But this gives Mike the time to use his backup knife that was in his belt that Harlan wouldn't have known about because he was breaking into the garbage truck while he was preparing, which is a good attention to detail. I do kind of find it funny that Harlan wants to get Mike arrested by a foreign government agency by killing someone and pinning it on him. Honestly, it seems like there'd be an easier way to do that, but Harlan is a fan of doing a two birds, one stone, as previously shown when he got Mike out of jail, but to get him to help him with the client. However, Harlan continues to talk, which masks the sound of blood hitting the floor as Mike cuts the ropes to escape. Also, Mike uses Harlan's pride to outwit him, which is classical Mike. But then, as the conversation comes to a close, Harlan hears Mike's blood hitting the floor, and it would be an impressive fight if it wasn't for the immense shaky cam. Honestly, I don't hate shaky cam in some instances. It works, especially when it's like a POV shot and they're running through the trenches and stuff. However, when you're doing it in a fight scene, it just gets too confusing of who's fighting who. That's why some of the fights in the Transformers films don't look the best, because you don't know who's got the actual upper hand. But this whole fight sequence ends with Mike jumping out of the window and the water being set on fire by Harlan. And I don't know why I'm thinking about it, but wouldn't Mike get hurt by the salt water he just went into with the fresh wounds he just created? Whatever. But the fire on the water helps Mike to escape, and Mike, always thinking, he grabs a rock to help him fight back. Also, Harlan is an idiot for following Mike's blood trail, knowing full well as anyone that Mike is leading him into a trap, which Mike does actually spring on him, getting the upper hand and tying him up for the Venezuelan police on the docks. Also, another instance on Mike not knowing Spanish.
Sí.
Habla inglés.
Yes.
which is kind of funny. They take Harlan to be witness that they need to take down Rufino's partners. At Maddie's, they debrief, and Maddie expresses her discontent about Harlan. But wasn't this you just a few days ago?
You're a bad liar, Harlan. I like that about you. You want a beer?
Anyway, she says the power of friendship speech that we all know for them, and the episode is over, with Mike taking the client and ensuring she's okay, and Sam wants to protect him like a bodyguard. This episode wasn't the greatest episode as a season premiere, because at the start of the first season, the pilot, you understand that he's up against the government trying to get back his job. In the season 1 finale, he finds the guy who burned him, quote unquote, and then afterwards gets pursued by Carla. In the season 2 premiere, we actually learn who Carla is through her giving Mike a job. In this episode, in the season 3 premiere, we don't get a new big bad for Mike. It is basically a client of the week kind of episode. Just doesn't feel as good as some of the other season premieres, even later on in the series. I mean, it was interesting that we get to see Mike wash up on the beach, tired and unknowing of what's going to happen. However, it doesn't give you that same action scenes that you get from a plane being on fire and Mike having to figure out what to do. I mean, yeah, he was thrown in jail, but it was a very short time. I think it's over before the Burn Notice logo comes out. Just not the best start for this season, especially since I think in the next episode, we meet the big bad of at least the first half of the season, who is a cop with a chip on her shoulder, which would have been better for this episode. It does show us a little bit about Mike and what happened with management now that he is basically declassified to the whole world and now everybody knows where he's at. But it is a little strange that out of all of the enemies that he's created throughout all of the years of him being a spy before the Burn Notice even happened, the only person to find him is a old friend, and he was only getting him out of jail to help him with a client that turned out to be a double cross. It would be a good episode if it wasn't the premiere. It does gain a little bit of marks because of how they treated Mike and Fee's relationship during this episode, but Sam was basically just the guy to get things done. It is passable, but very barely. And it is definitely not my favorite. Thank you for watching. If you were curious on how an FBI team catches serial killers using psychology, watch my other series, Inside Criminal Minds. Link in the description. And as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, please.